Aloha, everyone. I'm Eva Andrade, and on this episode of Faith in Politics, we are going to talk about abortions by city, banning abortions by city, vaccinations, incentives, and force. So let's chat about that. I remember once when I was a child walking through one of the rides at Disney. I don't remember what ride it was, but it was dark. And I held my dad's hand really tight because I was scared, and holding his hand is what made me feel safe. It didn't matter where I was because I knew that my dad was confident and strong. And I followed him without any anxiety because I knew my daddy got this. To this day, whenever I get fearful, I go back to that memory and that place of safety, knowing that my dad was holding my hand. Today, although I don't physically hold his hand, I know that if I need him, he's there. And God is just like that. I realize that not everybody has a great relationship with their father, and for some people, their father has passed away, and my heart goes out to you. Experiencing the good, the bad, and the ugly, it shouldn't scare us, however, from trying to build that relationship with God the Father, the great I am. My worldview is secure because it's based on the unchanging truth of who God is and not who I am. Who I am will change because I'm human, and that makes me imperfect. Barna recently did a survey that showed that only 6%, and this is down from 12% in 1995, of the respondents had a biblical worldview. The other 94%, according to Barna, shifts, and it goes from this thing to that thing. But what's really scary about this poll is that they reported that 51% of these people believe that they have a biblical worldview. But then when it was drilled down, it was actually only 6%. When the pandemic shut the world down, I remember thinking that God wasn't shut down. And God can never be shut down, so I wasn't worried about him not being there to help us navigate the situation and give us the grace to get through it. What I wasn't prepared for, however, is the way people looked and still look to the government to solve all our problems. Governments change, leaders change, party control changes. God, in his infinite greatness, never does. It may seem like we're walking in darkness, but I choose to put my hand into the hand of a father who will confidently navigate through the messiness of today's world. And that's my thoughts for the week.
Okay, worldview, biblical worldview. Those are my touch words.
Did I trigger you?
You didn't. Well, no, but
I triggered you in a good way.
It doesn't surprise me that only 6% of the people that responded to the details in the poll were analyzed to actually have a biblical worldview. Because if you have a biblical worldview, the decisions that you make moment by moment, your emotional reactions to things will be biblical. But the church doesn't look very much different than the world anymore. You know, how many people in the church are divorced? How many people in the world have unmarried parents? You know, all that stuff, right? So 6% is super low. That's very depressing to me. But it's not surprising. The church needs to, once again, look very different than the world.
Well, it's interesting because if you look up Barna's research, their recent research, they drill down a lot of this stuff, and it's very scary when you think about, especially the younger generation, right? Because, I mean, why do people go to church? You know, they ask these questions. Why do people go to church? In the old days, people went to church because this is where they built their worldview. They got it from the pastor. They got it from the Bible. They got it from their brothers and sisters, right? I mean, what does the Bible tell us about forsaking the gathering?
Well, we're not supposed to do that.
Absolutely. And why? Because I can be in my own bedroom studying my own scripture, and I can preach to myself until the cows come home, but it's not going to change my life.
So let me throw a date at you.
Okay.
1954, when the IRS passed the Johnson Amendment saying, if you're a tax-exempt charity, you cannot intervene in elections. We wouldn't have had a Revolutionary War if that rule was in effect with today's current pulpit. But the truth of the matter is the Black Robe Regiment, where the pastors that were military commanders preached on Sunday and had military uniforms on the rest of the week.
Well, and that's the important thing. And that's kind of what I want to focus in this first quarter. What we're talking about is, one of the things that's happening across the nation right now, Jim, and because people don't have a biblical worldview, which is why we're going here, right?
And we talk about that in our Community Action Network trainings.
We do. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But so interesting what just happened in Ohio, right? They have a sanctuary city now in Lebanon, Ohio. And I want to play a quick video for you so you can kind of see what's happening there, because this was done by a city council. And I want to get your thoughts on that. So let's go to that video.
Lebanon, a city rich in history, and last night was another historic night here. City Council voted unanimously to ban abortions.
This ordinance passed here in Lebanon. It's not saying that women can't get an abortion. It's just saying within the city limits, it cannot take place here.
Mark Lee Dixon of Texas is the founder of Sanctuary Cities for the Unborn. He led the initiative, just as he has done in 28 other cities in Texas and Nebraska. Like elsewhere, Lebanon's law was met with support and opposition.
This ordinance is dangerous. It's blatantly unconstitutional. It's super confusing, and it's cruel.
The ACLU says it's considering legal action. Representatives call the ordinance a power play, trying to scare people and cut down on abortion care in our state.
Large parts of it are rhetorical, meant to stigmatize abortion, and with its language, interfere with the availability of really critical health care.
The Lebanon ordinance declares abortion-inducing drugs to be contraband. Dixon says that applies to the abortion pill, also known as RU-486.
The morning after pill, Plan B emergency contraception, is exempt in this ordinance.
While it's now illegal to assist with an abortion, Dixon says that only applies if the procedure takes place in Lebanon.
We're not saying that women can't go to Cincinnati or another place to get an abortion. We're just saying within the city limits.
And under this new law, any woman who were to seek an abortion here in Lebanon would not be prosecuted, but anyone who assisted her could be charged with a misdemeanor. The punishment could be 6 months in jail and up to a $1,000 fine. Reporting live tonight in Lebanon, Karen Johnson, WLWT News 5.
Okay, so Karen, I know a lot of people have questions about this. Let's really break it down here. What impact will this have in reality? Meaning, are there even any abortion clinics in that area?
Yeah, that's a good question, Tree, because there are no abortion clinics here in Lebanon. And to my knowledge, I don't know of any that have tried coming in here.
So the city council in Lebanon, Ohio, they voted unanimously to pass this bill. And it actually just sent people into an uproar. And I kind of want to get your opinion about this because, as you know, we always have our pro-life champions here in Hawaii. They go, why can't we do that here in Hawaii? But let's talk about the difference between when a legislature does something, when a city council does something, and when the federal government does something.
Okay, so you're asking me to explain the structure of the Constitution of a state and of the U.S. government.
Well, especially the difference between, in this case, it was a city council that passed this resolution.
Okay, so cities in the counties in Hawaii, the cities, have to abide in their regulations with the state constitution and the federal constitution. So interestingly, that we can have sanctuary cities for illegal immigrants, which violates federal immigration law. But how come nobody's complaining about that? But when you have a sanctuary city for the unborn, obviously abortion supporters point out that it violates the right to an abortion. And my response to that is two things. First of all, it's the hypocrisy of the times we live in. But more important than that, it's fabulous that the city of Lubbock or Lebanon wanted to create a sanctuary city for unborn babies, but they don't even have an abortion clinic anyway.
Well,
So here's the interesting thing. The same thing happened in Lubbock, Texas, where the city council chose not to pass a sanctuary city law, but the people by 62% passed it. And what happened? So we would think, oh, the pro-life activists are at work, they're lobbying, they're putting this thing on the ballot, they're getting a vote out, they're doing all this stuff. Yay, they succeeded. Now they can rest on their laurels, but they can't, because immediately the Planned Parenthood in Lubbock, Texas sued because under the 14th Amendment, there is a right to abortion prior to viability.
And we're going to actually dedicate a major part of a upcoming show on that very issue, because we get a lot of questions on that.
So the ancillary point, though, is the other side never, ever gives up.
And we have to be the same.
Up. We think we're done. We're never done either. We
need to know that once you start fighting for life, family, freedom, and all these things, it's going to be an ongoing battle. We're not going to have a win.
It started in the Garden of Eden, and it's always been.
And it's going to be ongoing. So now fast forward a little bit, because I want to very briefly get into, so President Biden's budget proposal removes language that would ban the use of federal dollars for abortion in most cases.
Which started 50 years ago with Henry Hyde. It's called the Hyde Amendment.
Right. And so we kind of briefly talked about that before. But what's interesting, because I know you had some strong feelings about this. So one of our listeners wrote a letter to the president about her concerns, and we're going to show that letter up on the screen. But Jim, you really took issue with the president's response.
So I have written a lot of letters to presidents of the United States, governors of the state of Hawaii, senators, legislators in Congress and in Hawaii, and mayors. You always will get a thank you letter that has nothing really much to do specifically with your question, but at least it's topically responsive. It's like the canned letter on that topic that everybody gets. So this letter from President Biden is 4 paragraphs. 1 word at the end of the first sentence responds to her topic, the author of the complaint letter or the request letter, and all the rest of it. This letter could be used if I was complaining that his dog bit somebody. This letter could be used if I was asking how we were going to make sure our elections were honest. This letter could be used if I sent him a happy birthday wish. This is absolutely the worst government response I've ever seen.
We want you to always follow up. When you reach out to any government official, make sure that you stay in contact with them if they don't respond the way you want to. So you're listening to K-Light Radio, and you're watching Kahlo TV, and we're going to come back to The World According to Jim. We'll be right back.
I know you're a big Priscilla fan, along with my wife and Karen.
Yeah, well, I'm expecting that she will be like, Danielle, I've missed you. That will not happen because she does not know me. But she did shout me out on her Instagram yesterday, so no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, she's my very favorite communicator of the Bible, woman.
How many Bible studies have you done using Priscilla's material?
Every single one of them.
Oh, you're kidding me.
No.
We're so excited to see Priscilla.
That's great. And she's coming up next, so yeah.
That's why I keep listening. I'm like, I don't want to miss her.
I'm currently in 2 different studies with Priscilla Shirer. She never ceases to expand the universe of my knowledge of Jesus Christ. I don't worship a person, but I love to worship with people who worship him. And even though she's expanded my knowledge of Jesus Christ, I expect for it to get blown up today, even more.
We have a mission here at Kahlo TV. We continue to be the only local Christ-centered media outlet in Hawaii. God has planted this station to nourish believers and to harvest souls for eternity. It's a calling we hold dear, and today we need your help. Partner with us as we continue to create original local programs.
We're so very grateful for that whole journey.
Walking down to our story room.
Oh my God.
So it's where the state cannot tell the church how to run their services, what songs to sing.
Showcase solid biblical teaching.
We reach more people in one day with the broadcast of the gospel.
It's music to God's ears.
Improve our infrastructure and influence social media. In these dark and disruptive times, there's never been a greater need to be rooted in God's Word. The kalo plant has been a sustaining food in Hawaii for centuries, and Kalo TV aims to bring much needed spiritual nutrition to these islands. Are you willing to labor with us for Hawaii, for your ohana, for the next generation? Go to kalotv.com and partner with us today.
Welcome back to Faith in Politics. So your friend responded to President Biden's letter, I hope, because we all need to do that. We've got to stay engaged. That's what I want to talk about today in The World According to Jim. So we just came through Memorial Day weekend. And as we always do, I went to Punch Bowl. Both of my parents' ashes are there. And it's just a great Memorial Day thing. And actually, when my boys were young, we put flags in early in the dark of morning every year. But what Memorial Day is about is the ultimate sacrifice, because it's about the soldiers who passed away giving their life in war. The ultimate sacrifice, that's an interesting concept, because the Bible talks about there's no greater love than he who lays his life down for his friend. That is the ultimate sacrifice. And that's what we're dealing with on Memorial Day, and we will next year again. And what occurred to me is, with respect to the idea in this letter and the abortion issue, how much do we actually sacrifice compared to the people on the other side of these biblical issues? And I'm concerned that maybe we don't sacrifice as much as we could. And we certainly don't sacrifice as much as we should, because we're losing the battle. And so I was thinking, so what kind of sacrifices do we do? Because we do sacrifice. We do little sacrifices, medium size, and some big ones. So maybe we've seen these commercials, give $19 a month to some charity. And that's, avoiding a couple of Starbucks coffees a month. That's kind of easy to do. We can do that. Sometimes we do dietary sacrifices to lose weight or to be healthy if we have a medical condition or whatever. Sometimes some of us, by personality, probably not me too much, sacrifice our time and visit people when they're ill or in the hospital or they need some kind of help.
And shout out to Janet Hochberg, Jim's beautiful wife, who does that.
She's
that's
totally
what she
like
does,
that.
yes.
And sometimes we sacrifice by donating our old stuff to garage sales or Salvation Army. Those are the little ones. Those are kind of easy. We do them all the time. We get some medium sacrifices, Parents, in my experience, medium sacrifices the entire time they're raising their kids, because kids take priority. Maybe they keep driving the same old car rather than get a new one, or they spend so much time driving their kids around to all these sporting things and talent things and all that kind of stuff. Or maybe they teach Sunday school or coach sports, or they're scout leaders or stuff. Those are the medium size. What about the big ones? How about the parents that homeschool their kids? How about all the first responders? What about serving in the military short of that ultimate sacrifice? And Memorial Day is about more than that. It's laying down your life for other people. Well, the framework that leads us to want to make these sacrifices, that is actually what's under attack. The other side opposes homeschooling. They oppose school choice. There's just this whole energy flowing against all the things that form the reason that we all sacrifice regularly. So what do we need to do? We need to be prepared to up our game on sacrificing, whether it's money, contributing money to HFF or Kalo or some other charities or churches or whatever. But it's our time, because the other side puts so much time and they're so tireless and they never give up, and it's just never ending, as we know at the legislature. I mean, it's never ending. They're never satisfied with a win. We get a little win, like in Lubbock, Texas, the city council votes to have a abortion-free zone, and immediately the other side files a lawsuit. And we're not like that. We're busy doing all these other sacrifices on a regular basis for our families. So I was kind of thinking, okay, so politicians and political activists is what we're facing on the other side. And we have to meet them on the battlefield at least with as much strength, courage, and commitment, or they're going to win. And they've been winning because things have changed an awful lot in the last 10, 15 years when we've been going to work and raising our families, and they've been very, very active. So what I wanted to do was raise awareness of a Heritage Action thing on their website. And we'll put the URL up there because I really want everybody that watches this show to add this next little 5-minute thing in their life and hopefully like what's in there and do more. But more than that, make sure they give this URL for 5 minutes to as many friends, family, and people in their circle of influence. So what are they? It's really interesting. There is many, many policy issues that Heritage Action is fighting, and they have toolkits. They have toolkits for keeping Title X money away from abortions, rejecting critical race theory, saving our elections, stopping Biden's radical nominees, legislation toolkit for coronavirus issues. I mean, there's a lot of these. Opposing socialist healthcare, immigration issues, born alive abortion survivors, the Equality Act, healthcare, education savings account for military families. Each one of these topics has a toolkit. If you click on the toolkit for the one that you're interested in, it gives you information. It gives you action items. We need to take advantage of this, and I'm sure there's a whole bunch of other ones available because we're getting beat. And if we don't protect our elections, we're going to get beat at the election, at the voting ballot box, which we cannot let happen. So it's time for the viewers of this show and everybody that they know to think about Memorial Day, ultimate sacrifices, and upping the ongoing sacrifices that each one of us make. And that's my thoughts.
Well, you and I talk about this all the time. Here in Hawaii, we have a very interesting way that we do things. You know, it's one of Hawaii's greatest strengths, but in some ways it can also be one of Hawaii's greatest weaknesses. And that's the way that we love one another, that we show aloha, that we show respect. I mean, our state capitol, when you go down there, even if there's somebody you disagree with, you'll say, "Hey, bro, what's up?" You know, and then you shake hands, and you might even, you know, and you might be very friendly in the hallway. And then the minute you go in to testify, right, you're glaring at each other across the room.
We never do that. Do you glare at people?
I don't glare at people,
but people, I don't either.
People glare at
There's
me.
There's a couple of them.
Okay,
there are a few well-known glarers, but we never do that.
I remember one of my greatest stories is I was down at the Capitol. I don't remember what issue it was, but normally, you know, the issues we're down there on is normally the moral issues. So I remember there was a kind of a mid-age guy that was there, and I'd seen him around a couple of times, and he comes over to me in the hallway and he goes, "I want to dislike you so much because of what you stand for." And he goes, "But you're really a nice person, and you're making that hard to do."
He was the UH union guy?
Was
the
he?
Professors union
guy? I was there. You were there. Oh, see? So, you know, I'm not making this up.
You're not.
But it's interesting because that's the way we do things in Hawaii. So I think, so he gave a shout out. Hey, Bart. So I think it's interesting that we deal with stuff that the mainland brothers and sisters fighting
We don't know that they aren't like that.
Well, no, I talk with them.
Okay.
And they're like, wow. Well, I mean, we get to go to the state capitol wearing aloha shirts.
And
you know?
the other thing too is, and this is another thing that I just don't understand. Everybody in Hawaii that lives on Oahu, which is 90% of the population, is within 45 minutes of the state capitol, and there's no reason not to know who your legislator is. On the mainland, it's not like that.
No, that's what I mean. We definitely do things different here. Again, I find it amusing that here in Hawaii, they don't care what college you went to. They do not care anything except, brah, where you in grad? Where are you in grad? Right? That's what, and when they ask, where are you in grad? They want to know your high school because that's how they place you in the community, right? Where did you grow up? You know, are you a Pearl City girl? Are you a Mililani boy? Are you a Hawaii Kai? You know, and I mean, on and on we could be. But
upcountry Maui.
Oh, that's my dad's peeps. That's my dad's peeps. Hey, Portuguese people up on Maui. So anyway, the point is that we do things differently here. So it's hard to get people involved. But you make a very good point, because when an issue comes up at the Capitol, and I'm flipping through the testimony, and you know I do.
I know you do.
Page by page, I'm like, all of these, especially University of Hawaii students, when Planned Parenthood has an issue, there are hundreds of girls, mostly young women, who are willing to send their little testimony in, their brief testimony, and then we'll send alerts out, and we'll get a couple people that will respond.
And you send alerts out to several thousand.
I do. And what amazes me is, so, and we talk about this, right? The different type of activists there are here in Hawaii, right? I mean, when people get involved, they have different reasons for getting involved. But it always cracks me up that the ones that are the most passionate are the ones that start with, "You're going to hell," you know, and then
and they're regulars.
Or your favorite threat, "We're going to vote you out of office." And then you and I have a good laugh about that, because that doesn't happen.
The one time we could have done it, it didn't happen in 2014.
Yeah. And so we look like a paper tiger, right? To a lot of the legislature. And so, but there is a sleeping giant in the church and in people of faith. It's a matter of waking them up. I mean, you know, there's that old saying, you don't poke the pig, right? I mean, I'm like, poke, get whatever you need to do to wake your butt up, you know.
Poke the pig? You sure it's not bear?
No. Well, it depends.
I think it's poke the bear.
No, it depends on where you're talking. If you're up country boy, you're talking poking the pig. It's, we don't have bears in Hawaii.
No. Okay. Well, it's an international thing. But anyway, go ahead. No, you're right. Okay.
Yeah.
So if the 250,000 people that apparently are churchgoers in this state actually voted their Christian values, the state government would be very different.
Yeah, but that goes back to how we started the conversation today on what is your worldview.
Exactly.
Because
I said
if you go to church, it doesn't mean that you're voting properly. And I don't care what church you go to.
Well, judging by who's elected here, we're not voting properly.
Well, but, you know, it depends on who you talk to, because there might be a politician that maybe doesn't agree on this issue, but they agree on this issue, which is why we're voting for them. I mean, people vote for people for a lot of different reasons. Here in Hawaii, we can get down into the weeds, but there's a loyalty here too. You know, if somebody went to school with somebody's grandfather or whatever, this is just kind of how you live life. And I wouldn't change it for the world. I love Hawaii. This is my home. I will always be proud to be part of here. And no, I'm not going to let you go where I think you're going to go with this. So I'm just going to cut that off right now, because I know you so well.
And I won't say it.
And you won't.
But it's true.
Well, I will ban you. You know, I will make noise and cut you off. And we know Pete's watching this. Pete, hi, Pete, behind the scene. So that's what we're going to do. So, ladies and gentlemen, we always appreciate that you join us on this episode of Faith in Politics. You're listening on K-Light Radio and you're watching on Kalo TV. And when we come back, we're going to get a little bit more into the mask mandate, and we're going to talk about incentives and punishments.
And ask for a constitution if you're willing to get active. We'll give you one.
All righty. So we'll see you in a minute.
I have my beautiful wife with me, Sharon. Yeah, it's so good to be with everybody here. And of course, we have Pastor Tony Evans and Priscilla Shire with us. Did you see a star in the making when she was a little
She was like this as a little girl.
Running around?
Yeah, running around. Yeah, she always was an actress kind of personality. She liked to get attention and give attention. And she was always putting on a show of some kind. Yeah, and then she would walk around. She'd take a brush.
Okay, this is
and walk around the house performing. There's a crisis need for men to man up, to be what we call kingdom men, and to rise up to the responsibility that God calls us to.
So, hey, I'm going to ask you right now, I wasn't planning on this. I'm sorry, producer Malala, but you got to come back and do a men's conference.
Hey, all you got to do is invite me.
Okay.
That's all you got to do is invite me.
We're done. We're doing it. Okay, that's the end, everybody. Oh, no, we'll keep going. Okay, sorry.
Aloha, I'm Eva Andrade. I'm the president and CEO of Hawaii Family Forum. And Hawaii Family Forum has been serving the faith-based community right here in Hawaii since 1998. What we do is we identify like-minded people in the community, we educate them, we motivate them, and then we activate them, standing on the foundational principles of Micah 6:8, which says, "What does the Lord require of you but to love justice and to do mercy and to walk humbly with your God?" So join us at hawaiifamilyforum.org and let's make a difference right here in this beautiful state of Hawaii. Mahalo. Welcome back to Faith in Politics. And now we're going to talk about the incentives for vaccination. First of all, before we jump into that, though, let's talk about where we're at here in the state of Hawaii, which here in Hawaii, we're one of the last remaining holdout states that still have, a lot of restrictions. But the mask mandate was loosened a little bit. And I think we should at least, let our listeners know where we're at if they're not from Hawaii. So, Jim, the latest order that came out from the governor's office was dated May 25th, and you're holding that in your hand.
In my hand. Signed by David Ige. Oh, by the way, somebody I sent something to, and they left me a voice message saying they got my whatever it was from Governor Ige.
Oh, okay.
Which was pretty funny.
Jim Hochberg. Anyway, so where we're at right now, the big thing is that now in the state of Hawaii, you do not need to wear your mask if you're outdoors, but there's still a little bit of restrictions on that outdoors. So maybe you can kind of give us a...
Okay, so it's a little bit odd because our governor doesn't follow the science that's being provided ostensibly by the Centers for Disease Control, which is actually, I think, and prevention. Because the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention gave everybody else in the country a waiver on things that we don't yet have from our dear governor. But he's saying that when you're in public settings, individuals shall wear face coverings over their noses and mouths except for these A through K exceptions. One of them is while outdoors.
Now, there was a long sentence in there. So
that got crossed off.
Yeah. So basically now it's just outdoors. That's where it ends.
Used to have the 6 feet of social distancing. If you couldn't maintain it, then while outdoors, you had to wear a mask. Now it says while you're outdoors, you don't have to wear a mask. Interesting. It says shall, but the penalty actually is directed at the operator or owner of a business who let you in violation of the shall wear a mask. It's not you.
So it takes, so they're not dealing with the person's right to choice. They're dealing with the
scoff law, the scoff mask. And this is interesting too. They define face covering is a tightly woven fabric without holes.
Well, was somebody wearing a lace mask?
Well, a hole is the space between the tightly woven fabrics.
Okay.
So, yeah, I don't know. It's the problem being a lawyer.
I don't know.
Nothing
Jim.
is easy.
A mask is a mask.
But listen to this. It's secured to the head with either ties or straps or simply wrapped and tied around the wearer's nose and mouth. Now, everybody I know can't wrap anything around their nose and mouth because their head's in the way. So I'm working on that.
Jim,
I want to figure this one out.
You are trying to find another way to come back at our governor, and you're looking at this the way a lawyer would look at it. But
that's what I do for a living.
That's what you do for a living. Okay, so that's kind of where we're at. So people were excited about that. But where I kind of want to go with this conversation is that what they've been saying is that they want to get to the next tier. And they want to loosen things up more. However, they can't do it unless they get to 70%. That's what they want, 70% vaccinations in the state. That's
Josh Green's number.
Right, that's what they want to get to. But here's the point. You have holdouts, right? You have people that have made it very clear they are not going to get vaccinated.
Okay, but we need to identify that.
Okay, but my point is, I started thinking, so that means that if we never get to 70 because there's 30% of people who refuse to get vaccinated, we're never going to move to the next tier. So is the blame going to be put on the anti-vaxxers?
Of course. And here's the really weird thing. At the national government administrative agency that the CDC is part of, Health and Human Services. 50% of the employees have elected not to get vaccinated, which is very interesting because they know more than the rest of us.
Well, and that's my point. It's like they know in order for them to get to this 70%, they got to do something. So they've decided they're going to be a little creative and offer these incentives.
And before we get to the incentives, they're also blaming white male evangelicals as the people that are refusing to get
Jim.
Now, but wait a minute.
Jim, white males are at fault for everything in this nation. You know
I
this.
specifically remember in 2020, in the late summer before we voted, Kamala Harris, in her stump speech, telling me she didn't trust Trump enough. She wasn't going to get the vaccination. So it seems that it's her followers that aren't getting vaccinated, or she actually has no political authority, which is probably the case. So let's talk about these incentives.
Yeah. So here in Hawaii, I think they're throwing out some different ideas for incentives, but nationally, I think some of these governors are getting very, very, very creative. So
there are some good ones.
Yeah. So anyway, I thought it was interesting, but everybody right now is talking about our president who said, get vaccinated, get a beer. That's kind of what he was saying yesterday. So, I'm thinking, wow, we're getting to the point now where we need to get to that, whatever that percentage is. Here in Hawaii, it's 70. Now, my understanding is that Hawaii already has a pretty high amount of vaccinations when you're looking across the nation. Like, we're doing pretty good.
When you do it as a percentage of the population.
Right.
So here's the interesting thing, though. In this article about listing the state incentives, at the beginning of the article, it said something that just struck me as very interesting. Daily administered doses in the U.S. fell dramatically in late April and May, according to CDC.
Mm-hmm.
That 51.2% of adults in the U.S. have been fully vaccinated, while 62.4% have received at least one dose.
Well, that's
occurred
the
to
problem.
me is
that's the problem.
After they got the first dose, they didn't get the second dose because it wasn't available yet. They're still waiting for 2 weeks, or the news about what this vaccine is all about has made them have second thoughts.
Well, or maybe they experienced some bad side effects with the first one and they didn't want to go back. And then there's also the cases of people who have contracted COVID after the first shot but didn't get the second. So maybe they think, well, I got it, so now I don't need to go back and get the second shot. I mean, we could be here all day talking about why they're not doing it.
But, all of these states that have all of these interesting things, some of them are big bucks, some of them are really little bucks. Like, Ohio's going to give 5 people $1 million.
Well, one lady already won.
Okay.
One lady won.
Well, so if you live in Maine and you're looking down the road at Ohio and 5 people are getting $1 million, the best you're going to get is a fishing and hunting license for free.
Well,
a resident hunting license is like $20.
Well, I'm just kind of going down the list on here too. So California is offering a chance at winning 1 of 10, 1.5 million. What political party controls California?
Well, it's the Democrat.
Okay. Colorado is also doing 5 people at 1 million. What color is Colorado?
Colorado's pretty blue.
Okay. Let's see. I'm trying to look at the ones that are doing like full scholarships. Delaware is doing the 12 to 17-year-olds are going to have a chance to win a full scholarship to a state university. Illinois has 50,000 free tickets valued at $4 million.
Free tickets to what?
Six Flags.
Yeah.
Okay, that's kind of fun,
Well, but sure. In fact, a friend of mine sent me the original story about Ohio giving $1 million things. And my response was, well, if you promise I get the $1 million, I'll take the vaccine, because if it turns out as worse as possible, at least Janet will have an extra $1 million.
Well, and that's interesting because when you're looking at this, I guess my point is for them to get to where they need to get, they have to offer incentives because there is a pocket of people that don't want it. So,
but see, it's an experiment, and that's why smart people are questioning why would they participate in an experiment if they have the legal authority and right to wait until it's over, read the results, and decide.
So I want you to put on your mind reading hat. Do you think it's going to work? Is the incentives going to work?
The ones where they're going to give away like a whole bunch of whatever the cheap thing is, they're probably not going to run out of them. I think 5 $1 million prizes, there will be people that will do that.
But where is the money coming from?
Well, it's tax money.
Okay, so all the people that are refusing to get the vaccinations have now put money into their state taxes that are now going to get it into the hands of someone to get their vaccinated.
Yeah. So there's another part of the story, which is what are businesses doing because they want their employees to be vaccinated.
And University of Hawaii is right now, they're having a discussion about this.
And the University of Hawaii is not requiring vaccinations for employees, only students.
I know.
And only when it's no longer an experiment. It's that thing at UH doesn't kick in until one or more of the vaccinations are approved by the FDA. But there's some interesting things about companies I get a lot of calls from people worried they're going to be required at work. The EEOC and the ADA and all of these soups from the government that regulate employment don't permit employers to require employees to do things by incentivizing them beyond what's called a de minimis, which is very small value thing. So there's this whole article about what that is. So a health insurance company was going to give a discount on the premium for health insurance to the employees working at the company that got vaccinated. That got struck down. That's too big of an incentive because it's an experimental vaccination. It has to be non-coerced. So all this talk about the government and employers and airlines and all that stuff requiring vaccination passports, as long as it's an experimental stage and not an approved vaccine, they can't legally get away with it. And I think the incentives and the talk about it being required are to force people to make the choice voluntarily early on. They can't do it. And if I get told I have to get it while it's not approved, I'm going to sue. You can't make me be a person in a Nazi concentration camp medical experiment if I don't want to.
And I think that's why people are getting upset, because right now there is so much misinformation out there on what employers can and cannot do. And people are worried that once it runs down the pike to them, what are their choices when it's put in front of them? And I think that this is a conversation we are going to have to continue to have until like you said, they get to the point where they're saying this is not an experiment any longer.
And even discriminating in seating based on vaccinated and not vaccinated, like at stadiums or whatever, that violates the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Was it you that sent the picture, and we'll try to find it, of a store that were issuing like Star of David?
Yes. That there was a store that seriously wanted people that had not been vaxxed to put a button on their clothing.
Yeah.
This is just ridiculous.
This is absolutely crazy.
And this goes back to, we can't allow the other side to be this much more active than us. It can't go on or we're going to lose everything.
You're listening to Faith in Politics on K-Light Radio, and you're watching on Kahlo TV. And when we come back, we're going to give you some suggestions on what you can do if you feel that your employer is putting pressure on you. We'll put that to Jim when we come back.
We have a mission here at Kahlo TV. We continue to be the only local Christ-centered media outlet in Hawaii. God has planted this station to nourish believers and to harvest souls for eternity. It's a calling we hold dear, and today we need your help. Partner with us as we continue to create original local programs.
We're so very grateful for that whole journey.
Walking down to our story room.
Oh my God.
So it's where the state cannot tell the church how to run their services, what songs to sing.
Showcase solid biblical teaching.
We reach more people in one day with the broadcast of the gospel.
It's music to God's ears.
improve our infrastructure, and influence social media. In these dark and disruptive times, there's never been a greater need to be rooted in God's Word. The kalo plant has been a sustaining food in Hawaii for centuries, and Kalo TV aims to bring much-needed spiritual nutrition to these islands. Are you willing to labor with us for Hawaii, for your ohana, for the next generation? Go to kalotv.com and partner with us today.
Hi guys, we're Fiona and Tisha from Oh Snap, It's Fiona and Tisha.
And we're with Kalo TV. We're going to be talking about the one, the only, Priscilla Shirer.
Oh my gosh, she was amazing at the 42nd Hawaii Prayer Breakfast a couple weeks back.
She dropped some bombs, and we're going to sort through the bombs and the nuggets, so come join us as we do this. We're so excited.
Aloha and welcome back to Faith in Politics. And what we were talking about before we jumped into the break, we were talking about, Jim, this fear that people have that their employer might begin to put pressure on them to take the vaccinations.
I get a lot of contacts, people.
So what are your thoughts on that?
So it's an experimental drug. So you cannot be forced to participate, generally speaking. However, there may be certain kinds of companies and certain kinds of positions of employment within those certain companies that a court, because of the politicization of COVID, may not uphold your right to say no. It's very, 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 very clear that you have to voluntarily participate in a medical experiment. That's unquestioned, except, well, politics are in the court system now. And so I can't say you're always going to win on that, because you could appeal all the way up to the Supreme Court and they don't take your case and you lose in the Ninth Circuit. So yes, there are some, like if you work in the emergency room and they're in a, everybody that comes into the emergency room as a sick person is at risk of getting more sick, because obviously they're already sick. They got issues with their immune system, or maybe they have a cut off leg. But anyway, so the hospital may want everybody that deals with patients in the emergency room or in intensive care or in surgery wards or whatever to get the vaccination. So say you don't want to get the vaccination. Well, they could assign you somewhere other than those kinds of places, maybe. Okay, that would be a good way to resolve it. But maybe the hospital administration really wants everybody to get vaccinated for political reasons, so they're not going to work with you on that. It's quite possible that a court would say, yeah, if you're going to be in those rooms in a hospital, you got to be vaccinated. And then you're stuck with, well, then I guess I have to quit my job. It shouldn't be like that. But the truth of the matter is it could be like that. Most medical disability issues require, under the federal labor laws, that if an employer is going to invade your religious freedom for work-related things, they have to do what's called have a reasonable accommodation for you. Usually it is, you're Jewish, you don't want to work on the Friday night to Saturday sundown Sabbath. So it's a reasonable accommodation for the employer to give you that time off and have you work at a different time. If you're the only employee and they would have to shut their store down for you to take the day off, the court would view that as not reasonable, and therefore you wouldn't get accommodated. But it's not an easy answer to your question. Can employers force you to get vaccinated? What they can do, and what we actually see these days with the activist left political people, is they're willing to push, even if they think they're wrong, until they lose in court, because it's many years, The publicity works in their favor. People voluntarily comply. Our side doesn't do that.
Well,
and it bothers me that we lose all the way through because we give up too easy.
Well, that too. But I think on the other side of the coin, there's also people who fight with the wrong ammunition. I mean, I've had calls to my office saying, well, it's against my religion for me to do this vaccination. And then I'm like, you're Catholic. It's not against the Catholic faith to do this.
Okay, so under the law, a religious exemption does not have to be part of the tenets of a faith. It has to be personal. So you can be a Catholic and support abortion, like some very prominent political Catholics, and that can be your religious faith. So it's not what the church overall says or what your denomination or what your pastor says.
Well,
It's
that's the point. And that's the point I want to make. So if you're going to make the argument, right, that this is against my religion, then you need to be able to articulate it in the manner that you just said. Because if somebody cannot say the Catholic Church says we cannot do this, or the Mormon Church says I can't do this, or Calvary Chapel says I can't do this. I mean, that is true. There could be.
And there's a huge issue, and I don't know why Franklin Graham is supporting the vaccine. When Franklin Graham comes out and, as a huge person in Christendom today, says, I think you should get the vaccine, that makes Christians who don't want to get the vaccine have a very difficult time arguing in public, not in court, that my religion says I'm a Christian, I shouldn't get the vaccine.
Well, and that's the point. The point is you can find religious leaders, and okay, let's stick with the Christian religion, right? You can find there are some Baptist pastors that have come out that are actually doing vaccinations on their property.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this can get absolutely crazy. But again, if you're going to make the argument, make sure you know what you're talking about, because if you don't and you lose, then overall it looks like Christians don't know what they're doing. So that's the point. But I think the reason that some of these pastors are coming out, it's because like even Fauci right now, right, with all the craziness that's happening because of his emails, or what he's claiming he read or he didn't read. I mean, the regular person, Jim, the regular person who has watched Fauci's press conferences from the very beginning, all the way back from, 2017, when he actually in some statement made a comment that the president could be up against the pandemic.
He said that President Trump was in fact going to have a surprise pandemic during his presidency. Now, how in January before the inauguration of President Trump in 2017, how did Fauci know that?
We're going to make that video available. We'll make that video available so people know what we're referring to. But the point is that if you have religious leaders watching a person who is in the know, right, you want to trust him, and he's making these decisions out there, then you want to do the right thing. And plus, let's be honest, most Christians do believe in the common good, right? They want to, if me wearing this mask is going to protect the wider community from getting COVID, I'm going to do that. I mean, most people, that's where they're coming from. But when you drill down and you start having this argument about follow the science and all that, we're going to be here for days, because what science are you going to follow?
Well,
There's so much out there right now.
One of the religious exemptions, and I'm not a scientist, so people complain to me that the vaccines are made out of aborted baby tissue or something like that. I actually don't even know if that's true.
One of them are. My understanding is that it is I better not say because it's escaping me
I
right
don't
now.
know the science of it, so I wouldn't know.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what I want to do, Jim, is I want to give some shout outs right now. But first, I want to share a video from our wonderful behind the scenes Pete, who just went to the beach with his wife and was enjoying a day off. And this happened.
Aloha, everybody. So my wife and I, Sharon, is holding the phone. We came to Lanikai to go do some paddle boarding, and then we're sitting here, and this beautiful lady here is walking across the beach, and she looks at me, and she says, "Pardon me, are you the person on Colo TV?" And I look at me, and so this is Barbara Miller, right?
Yeah.
Barbara, you have a message to tell Eva and Jim.
Yes, Eva and Jim, I'm just so blessed by your program. And your sincerity and your honesty and your courage, because I'm one that believes that Jesus does want us to know what's going on and the truth about what's happening politically. And I'm just floored by Kahlo and the honesty and the courage. So thank you. Just thank you from the bottom of my heart.
I also want to give some shout outs to Sister Helene, who made a comment on YouTube. She watched our video, but she also wrote the letter to the president. And so it was her sharing his response that we were able to do this. So I want to give a shout out to you, Sister Helene. Thanks for watching. I also want to give a shout out to two guys from my Bible study, Mike and Keith. They watched the show. Now, Mike, thank you, Mike, for coming up to me last night and saying, I have Faith in Politics taped so that I can always watch it. And he goes, I was going to watch it tonight. And then I realized, why am I going to watch this when I could go see Eva live?
Oh, boy.
So that was interesting. That was fun. But Mike also said, I love the show. Don't always agree with everything you say, but I like the show. And you know what? We are talking politics, faith in politics. Everybody, even in the faith-based community, are not going to agree with everything because that's why we're doing the show.
That's true. And I got a shout out to a friend that said, I love the show, but you don't ever do a call to action. You need to do a call to action.
Get involved. That's the call to action. In fact, every show, we may not say it, it's get involved. Also know who you're voting for. We do that almost every show. You do your little spiel. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to my two older brothers, James and Kevin, who both watch the show. And
hey, James. Hey, Kevin.
And I don't know about you, but my brothers and we have a really good relationship. So when I say or do things that they don't agree with, they do let me know. So thanks for keeping me in line.
Tell them to send me a copy of those emails.
James is still looking forward to playing guitar with you, Jim. So we got to make that happen. What we want to do, as always, is encourage you to plug into Kahlo TV to partner with us to keep this show on the air. And you can do that by reaching out to Kahlo TV and making a donation so that this show can stay on. We also want you to spend your time listening to K-Light Radio and the great programming that they do, because when you're stuck in traffic, cars still have a radio. People turn on the radio.
That's when I listen to the radio.
Hey, I do. In fact, I was just joking around with Jake earlier that, man, in my time driving, I used to always listen to a few of the great speakers, and they're still there. These guys are still there. So make sure you plug in and do that. Next week on Faith in Politics, we're going to be drilling down a little bit on some of the politics that's happening across the nation. You want to stay tuned for that. We're working on getting a special guest. We don't want to announce it because we got to make it happen before we can get him on. Join us, as always, every Friday, 10 a.m., Kahlo TV and K-Light Radio. Thanks for joining us this week on Faith in Politics. We'll see you next week. Mahalo, everybody.
Aloha.